But in any case, I don't think we can do, and one of the implications I fear of this cliche that I'm modifying, I'm not challenging it, but I'm modifying it, is that it creates a kind of paralysis. And I'll just give you a quotation from a famous conservative American political scientist who died a few years ago, but he was very influential. His name is James Q. Wilson. And he was talking about these issues, secularization and the family and so forth, and he said, at one point he threw up his hand. This is a political scientist. This man understands the importance of politics. But he said, when addressing these social issues, he said, if you believe as I do in the power of culture, you will realize there is very little one can do. Right? So the culture becomes, if you can't change the culture, which is obviously a huge undertaking, a long-term undertaking, then you can't do anything about it. There's nothing you can do. So it becomes an excuse, I think, for paralysis, for doing nothing. And this, I fear, is kind of the danger. Just to take one issue, no Christian that I know of argues that we can't protect innocent unborn life without changing the culture. Right? We believe that we should change the laws to protect people from being killed. And nobody says we first have to change the culture before we can change the laws. Well, that's absurd. In many cases, you have to change the laws, and you have to change them right away. And you have to change and in order to do that, and in doing that, you are also changing the culture. You are affecting the culture in that very process. So that's one kind of principle I wanted to address as a kind of general statement of the integrity, or if you like, or the importance of things which are kind of temporal and quite down to earth, and even sometimes perhaps we might think quite vulgar, like politics, quite profane at least. The other place I want to maybe bring the discussion down to earth a little bit is, again, in my own area, is that the manifestation of secularization that we see today, and the one that really touches on people's lives, we're talking here about the human element here. And if we're talking about the human element, the thing that touches people's lives and affects people's lives quite dramatically, I think nothing affects, there's no area of secularization, no manifestation of secularization more important than areas of the family and things like, and connected issues like children and sexuality and so forth, that whole matrix of issues. Think about it. How many people do we know? We all know people like this, and I know there's many in East Central Europe, whose main contact with the church, with the faith, with religion, occurs through these stages in their life. People who never go to church, or seldom go to church, except when they get married, when their children are baptized, and maybe for funerals. So this is the area, this is the intersection of the faith with many people's lives. And I think in many ways we lose an opportunity. I think a lot of the secularization process is happening in this realm, and it's being unchecked. We're not challenging it. The church is the church, or I say the church of the churches, all the churches. But especially, I suppose I'm weighing this toward the Western churches, where I have the most influence. So my criticisms are equally valid of Protestant churches, Catholic Church. Some of you may have ideas, maybe the Orthodox Church in some ways is better in some respects, but if it is now, then it won't be for long, if we don't do something about it. So this is an area where the church is losing an opportunity. I read you that quote yesterday from Gabriela Kubi in her recent book on the sexual revolution, where she says, abandoning sexual morality is the church's core of the church's self-secularization. And I think it's very important. We abandon this area, and we're abandoning God. We're deserting our turf. We're deserting our coasts. The other thing too is that this is not an external evil. It's an evil that's taking place well within the church's domain, the church's turf. You can make an argument that racial discrimination or sex discrimination or many evils in the world are secular evils. The church still has a responsibility to address them. Poverty, for example. The church always has a responsibility to address these issues, but they're not issues happening within the church's own primary realm of responsibility. Whereas marriage is for the Catholic Church and for the Orthodox Church, this is a sacrament. Even in the Protestant churches, we treat it as a sacrament in all but name. It's an ordinance of the church. So it's part of the church's most basic turf to deal with with the church, with marriage, certainly, and baptism, the bringing of children into the church, the entrance of people into the church, and of course funerals as well. But it's an area that the church, I think, is largely deserted. I go to a very conservative church, a conservative Anglican church, and we very seldom hear a sermon on fornication, cohabitation, adultery, divorce, unwed childbearing. We almost never hear sermons on this subject. I'm told there are some. I'm told that in the Orthodox Church you do get this quite directly. But we don't even hear preaching on it. Let alone do the churches address this, as a public policy issue. But my other argument here is that these are an area of direct jurisdiction for the church in terms of public. It's a direct, straightforward confrontation between church and state, in which the state has clearly overstepped its bounds and is abusing its authority. In other words, many Christians are reluctant to get involved in politics. We have to be careful how we get involved in politics. We shouldn't get too involved in politics. We shouldn't we shouldn't go in and politicize the church, politicize the gospel. We shouldn't do that. I agree, we shouldn't. We should never do that. But throughout the church's history, not just the church's history, but the defining moments in Western history, the defining moments, not only in the church's history, but the defining moments in Western history have been when churchmen have stood up and said to the state, you are abusing your authority. You are overstepping your bounds. You are abusing your authority. What you're doing is a violation of God's law, and God is angry. Okay, I'm thinking of churchmen like Ambrose, like St. Stanislaus in Poland, like John Fisher, like Mindszenty, like John Paul, like Protestants too, like Wurmbrand in the communists. These were churchmen who stood up and said, they weren't meddling in politics. They were telling the state, you are going too far, you are abusing your authority. And I haven't seen that happening here in this area today in the sexual revolution. I don't see churchmen standing up and saying this in this forthright way. John Paul actually did about 15 years ago in the early 2000s. He did. Oddly enough, he was attacked by the right as well as by the left when he criticized divorce of all things. It was amazing. No one's really done so since. So this is an area where we're missing an opportunity. And yes, the churches have confronted these issues on select areas. We confront abortion, rightly so. In recent years, the churches have confronted same-sex marriage. That's another one where the churches have stood up. Although I would qualify that. It's not actually the churches that have stood up. It's actually more likely to have been Christian lobbying firms. I say this with some respect because we have a representative of such firms here, and I work with such firms, and I have a lot of respect for what they do. In the West, we have these. In America, we've pioneered this Family Research Council, Focus on the Family, Alliance Defending Freedom. Britain, we have Christian Concern, and these NGOs, these Christian NGOs, have been imitated here in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe. And I'm very glad to see this. I just came from Budapest and I listened to the World Congress of Families. So I work with these Christian law firms, okay, and that's good. I applaud what they do. But it's not the same as churches being involved. Okay, a church is an extension, is a civic institution. To hire lawyers to fight your battles for you is sometimes necessary and admirable, but it's not the same thing as the church as a community organization, as a body of both believers and just ordinary citizens standing up and saying, there's something wrong with our polity and something's wrong, immoral is taking place here. So I think that Christian law firms are good, but I think we shouldn't just pay $100 a year to the Family Research Council or Focus on the Family or the ADF and think that we've done our civic duty. And I fear that that's kind of what's happened in some ways. So, but the other complaint I have is that the churches do confront, yes, abortion, same-sex marriage, you could name a couple other issues. But they haven't looked at there's so much they haven't done, so many issues that they're not dealing with. And these go back decades. And I'll just throw out the ones briefly that are my pet peeves. But one of them is, and I mentioned them the other day, but I'll just do it a little differently to that. For example, in many ways, a lot of this started with 40 years ago with the no-fault divorce revolution. In terms of its impact on people's lives, divorce has far more impact on people's lives than same-sex marriage. In terms of destroying people's homes, people being thrown out of their homes, people being separated from their children, people being plundered for everything they have. The divorce system was revolutionized with the legal, basically the whole concept of no-fault divorce, no-fault anything is a contradiction of terms. You can't have no-fault justice. And again, if you accept the biblical, even if from a biblical point of view, what do the prophets say? The prophets say that, let justice run down. The secular state has to be concerned with justice. It has to. Whether you're a secularist or a Christian or religion, you have to. If the state is not concerned with justice, it's the role of Christians to point the finger and say, this is unjust. And no-fault divorce is like announcing it to the world. No-fault justice is an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. You cannot have no-fault justice. And it is, not surprisingly, it is poisoning our entire legal system. And I can name you many specific manifestations of that. My book, which is coming out soon, will actually list some manifestations of how no-fault principles are spreading throughout the judiciary of the Anglophone countries especially, and elsewhere to the European Union, and poisoning the font of justice, of our justice system. So I can go on, I wrote an entire book on the no-fault divorce, so I won't go into that in any more detail, but it's just mind-boggling how much it has, the revolution. And my other argument is that it led directly to same-sex marriage. And I can give you quotations from that. Just briefly, there's no denying it whatsoever. It led directly to same-sex marriage. In fact, the homosexualists, the homosexual activists say this, they admit this. They say, if you want to go back to monogamous marriage, if you want to go back to the 1950s, where marriage was an enforceable legal contract, go ahead, and we'll stay out of it. We won't want it. It's only because you, the heterosexuals, have adulterated marriage, have vulgarized marriage. That's the only reason that it fits us. It's attractive to us because of the way that you, the heterosexuals, have debased it. You see, so they admit this. It's the logical next step. So this didn't come out of the blue. This didn't come out of nowhere. This came out of directly out of the divorce revolution of 40 years ago. And I could give you many other examples. I also mentioned, to just move on, the kind of gender crimes that have been, that have been rampant in recent years. This is especially on the university campuses, the military, but throughout our society. These accusations of various new kinds of, some of which are modifications of existing crimes like rape, some of which are kind of new language, new jargon to create new crimes that have no definition. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence. Okay, we have laws against these things already, but they've been politicized. So the politicization of criminal law is another area that the sexual revolution. And I won't go into this again. I can't forever. I've got another book coming out of that, so I won't go into it. But one thing that strikes me about the churches and all this, just to point out where the churches and how this leads directly to secularization in a very striking sense. There is the feminist claim that rape is flagrant in the universities and in the military. They say that there's a rape epidemic. Okay. Well, either they're right, in which case, shouldn't the churches be saying something about that? Right? Or they're wrong. It's a hoax. Well, I think it's a hoax. But either way, the churches should be saying something about it. Because the hoax is only plausible because of the way that universities have become, not to put too fine a point on it, orgies. Right? The universities of the Western world, of America, Britain, and the Western world, have become sexually decadent, incredibly. I mean, they're just, there's no other word for it, they're orgies. And that's why these rape accusations are plausible, because young men and young women are indulging in extramarital sex flagrantly. Well, this is the logical conclusion of that. Well, shouldn't the churches be saying something about that? Shouldn't the churches be saying what the decadence that goes on in the... For example, one could make the argument from a theological point of view that young men who engage in extramarital sex in the universities, and they're accused of rape, right? You could make the argument that these young men, okay, they're not guilty of rape, but they are guilty of sin, right? And so even though they're getting an unjust punishment from man, from humanity, you could argue they're getting a just punishment from God, right? That if they don't want to be accused of rape, they shouldn't be engaging in extramarital, premarital sex, right? Well, That's an argument you can make, and that's an argument the churches should make. Shouldn't the churches say something like that? But the churches don't even say that. They don't say anything. If the churches weighed in on it and made that argument, I think it'd be very constructive and very helpful. It would probably solve the problem. It would call the feminists bluff. It would address. It would create a dialogue of constructive, way. But the churches don't because they're frightened. They don't want to deal with this. They don't want to be accused. Well, they haven't. I think in many cases they haven't upheld their own turf of enforcing sexual morality in a pastoral way. So when it becomes a political controversy, they no longer have the moral authority to stand up and say, this is the position we should be taking. So, I'm very, very concerned about this. The churches, instead of, it's not that they're taking the wrong position, they're taking no position. They're absent, they're AWOL, as we say. They're deserted their posts in some ways on these issues. And, you could say this about a whole series of issues. Maybe in the instance of time, because almost half the time, so maybe I should be quiet now and just bring up other examples if people have questions or things to say. But my point is that churches need to just say something. And you in the Eastern Church have got to, if you don't see what's going on, it's because nobody's saying anything. It's not because nothing's happening, it's because nobody's saying anything. So I'm trying to point out to you the danger, one of the dangers that you need to look out for. Yeah.
So why, just to follow this up a little bit, why aren't the churches speaking out? Why aren't they speaking out? I mean, I have my ideas, but why aren't they speaking out?
That's a good question, because they've been infected for so many years with liberalism, and they're afraid to speak out simply in a pastoral way, to give a sermon that's hard-hitting against divorce, against,
right.
Or against cohabitation.
And I think, too, in the American context, they're afraid to take on feminism, especially because of the role that women play in the churches, and women are the majority in these churches, the majority of parishioners in many cases, and especially in the Catholic Church, the all-male clergy feels like they can't say anything to them. They don't understand them. They're a celibate caste, quite literally, and they're very aware of that, and they feel like they can't say anything.
But not all women are feminists.
No, right.
That you are a woman doesn't imply necessarily.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what they think.
And there are a lot of feminists, at least in our churches.
There are enough of them, and then there are of course there are degrees of this. I mean, very few women are sort of rabid, left, Marxist feminists, but all women will make comments about women's equality, will tease men about being mistreated, and so for the typical Catholic clergy, he just says, "I'm not touching any of it. I'm not going near that minefield." And so
there's a kind of intimidation in the U.S. and it goes back to what Stephen was talking about, I think in Constanza as well, where it's like a trump card. If a woman raises an issue, you are going to lose, and you just keep your mouth shut and stay away from it. I mean, there's an intimidation factor. So the unjust people use that kind of feeling, because there can be legitimate complaints and all that. But the point is, a lot of these priests are afraid, to go near these kind of issues because they'll get accused of being insensitive.
And the homosexuals are using the same methods. That's the interesting thing. They're piggybacking on feminist methods.
right, you don't want to be right because weak men create the opening for this. In other words, I mean, I saw this with thinking of two civic organizations in Washington D.C. that were all male for many years, and now are male and female to their detriment. A famous former men's club called the Cosmos Club, which I was a member of, and the Knights of Malta, a Catholic charitable, religious, charitable organization, both of which gave women big enhanced roles, not because women were pushing for it, because the men thought they had to do this. The men were the advocates for it.
Can I ask a question of the Orthodox, along the lines of something Stephen was saying, is, you know, we don't hear sermons preached on sexual morality in the West. And it seems to me the Orthodox that I've encountered seem very confident about Orthodoxy's future in the culture. And so, which I'm interested in and a little bit hard to understand, because it seems like the same kind of currents that Stephen is talking about are working their way into Orthodoxy and will be a challenge for it. But, I mean, I hope that they're routed at the border. But do Orthodox priests preach on sexual morality? Is that in the divine liturgy, or is that appropriate? No?
We have priests here, so
Yes?
Yes, obvious.
I can give you an example as a.
It should be obvious. I know, but they don't do it in the West. Yeah, no, they don't do it.
Nobody seems to care, you know.
I can give you
Not in the, we do that, but not in the
Aggressive mode.
aggressive
and of course,
way.
It's very subtle. It's very
you
subtle.
cannot be self-restrained just because you as a priest you are a man, which is always the case in the Orthodox Church, and half of the church are women.
Yeah.
And you cannot self-restrain yourself just because of that. This is, speaking of tradition, this is the tradition. You have to do that as a male priest. I can give you an example when it was every year the priest gave a sermon about women and sexual morality, especially. And it was the issue of women and how Christian women should be was definitely approached very directly. It was, according to the calendar, when we celebrate the Christian women, which is the second Sunday after Easter. It's called I don't know exactly the term, the Sunday of the women that
Christian women.
the Christian women that met with Jesus after he was risen. And at that time, our priest emphasized the fact that women had a very important role in that moment, the historical moment. And they were chosen to be the ones to receive the great news. Though, of course, with the history of Eve and everything else before, they didn't put women in such a good position. But this is a way, also when the priest is talking about how women today, sometimes they don't cherish that memory of how Christian women should behave. And he's speaking a lot about everything from how women dress, how women behave, how in a sense. So it's every year, speaking of rituals and the tradition, he approaches these issues and he comments on the problems that we face today in the secularized world as women. Yeah.
And the priest has personal relation with the women in confessions, in private discussions, not just in the sermon.
Well, but I appreciate that, but what I was wondering about is how about sexual morality generally? And so not about the women, but people. Do you preach about that?
Yeah.
And give me a little more. I mean, you said you do it in a subtle. Is that?
It's in a subtle way. At least in my church, these themes are rarely touched. I mean, the sermons have more a historical, exegetical character. It has exegetical characteristics, yes.
So don't want to go more on it.
No, there are not so many moral aspects. Just general orientations.
That's the way our sermons are. General.
I'd say our sermons are just
Education,
vaguely.
maybe in family, No, not.
There are also meetings in some churches of the priests just with young people in the church after the service. Kind of a Sunday school. We don't really have a Sunday school in the Orthodox Church, but this kind of, and our priest invites just young people unmarried and they have talks about sex education.
We must develop this.
The main issues are faith, usually, and our approach to faith.
Thanks. Yeah.
First of all, because it is the discussion about church's voice. Maybe if we will consider the tension between religion, to say so, in its different forms, and state,
in there might be an answer. And we know from those typology, church, sect, cult, and so on, that this tension is very, very low in the case of the church. So we may say that the church is very comfortable with the state, and the state is very comfortable with the church. And this happened since Constantine the Great. You know, although, as you mentioned, there are some voices in the church who, from time to time, are strongly opposing a church policy, or a state policy, or attitude, or and so on. I don't know. Maybe here it might be the answer. My question for Mr. Stephen is: who should speak for the church? Because the church somehow considered like that might be something an abstract entity, you know. The church should do. The church should speak. The church should. Okay, it's okay. It is correct. But who should? The priests, the layman, the leader, and so on. You know. Here's or everybody. I don't know. And about the sermons, about your question, I think this, or it can be noticed in the church that there are at least, of course, on a continuum, at least two parties to this. So the secularized ones, those who preach generally, trying to be quite politically correct, of course, in the Romanian way, you know, for the moment, and the fundamentalist party, especially in the monasteries, you know, where those conventions, secularized conventions, are not very important. So it might be very offending for a woman, for example, to go to the church and the priest to tell her, you know, at her parish church, you know, you should do like that, or you should wear. It can be very uncomfortable. But when she goes to the monastery, she accepts such critics very
It's a more conservative environment.
Yes, it's a more conservative environment. And for the moment, there are two voices, according to. But maybe the fundamentalist or conservative, to say so, yes, it's a better term, conservative party of the church will become weaker, I guess, seeing the experience of the Western churches.
If people don't speak out, and I think that is what will happen. And yeah, I mean, to answer the first part of your question, I think anybody should speak out. You know, I would like it if the bishops or the archbishops or the you know, the appointed leaders would take the leadership. But you know, the prophets were often not the official spokesman. They were the ones that were inspired by God. And you know, this has happened sometimes. You know, we've had, you have under communism, the Populushkos and the Laszlo Tokish and people, they weren't always the highest level ranking churchmen. And I think, when people do speak out, they should be supported by the church, and they're often not. So, I think it's a very straightforward. I think you can make a very good case. This is not the church, and certainly in something like divorce. You can make a very good case that the church is not interfering in the state. The state has overstepped its bounds. You can make it the other place that's very similar. There's a secular counterpart to all this, of course, is the welfare state, which I didn't talk about here. But the welfare state, first of all, it's a competitor for the church as far as charity goes toward the poor, which is, in the church's self-interest. But it's not only a competitor; it's a bad competitor. It's a competitor that not only doesn't deal, because in the past, Christians over the centuries have always been concerned about the poor, the church, but they always have considered the poor. The corollary to helping the poor is to be concerned with their sexual morality, right? Because so much of poverty is caused by broken families and single parents, single mothers, So the church, these always went together. And when you separate those two, which is what the welfare state does, it not only doesn't deal with sexual morality, it actually positively encourages bad sexual morality. And on top of that, it does so in a way that has very, very serious social consequences. Crime, truancy, substance abuse, all of these things are caused by the broken homes that come out of the welfare state. So here's an example of the church's traditional morality on sex and sexuality being broken, and the breaking it leads directly to the most serious problems of our society, which also leads, by the way, to huge domestic spending, of course, which is bankrupting all of Western society. Which you could make a good, in other words, you could make a good case that failure to enforce sexual morality is bankrupting the most prosperous, affluent countries in human history. And the churches should be yelling about this. They should be, I told you so, frankly. This is what happens when you don't obey God. It's right there in Deuteronomy and everywhere else. You don't obey God's laws on sexual morality. You have poverty, you have bankruptcy, you have all kinds of crime. What more could you ask for? The church should be crowing about it.
But well, you see, I don't know if you are familiar with this initiative to change the Romanian constitution and to include the family and the marriage between a man and a woman. Well, the point is that the initiative belongs to the Coalition for the Family. And officially, the church has, or to say so, the institution of the church, to be more precise, officially has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with this coalition. It is a coalition of lay people,
from all denominations.
Of course, the church institution, again I underline, institution supported it, but somehow very discreet. Why? Because we don't want to have to alter our relation with the state, and to show that the initiative does not belong to some long beard, but to the lay people, to the active members of the church, and so on and so on. And this, for this reason, I was saying that the church tries to conserve less or no tension between itself and the state, according to the sociological theory. Because it was the same in the communist period, in the communist time. Everybody knew about the crimes, But the church tried to it didn't make a compromise, but tried to keep in touch with the state, not to be to confront the state. And today it is the same, and always referring to the moral sexuality, to the sexual moral, those conservative voices will be very loud and clear. The official, to say so, the official voice of the church will say, okay, to be homosexual is not good, it's bad, it's a sin. In a small article somewhere in a paper that nobody reads, as official, and about divorce, it is the same. Of course, any priest in his own parish will always, in face-to-face dialogue with his parishioners, will promote the Christian values, but officially.
Yeah, and regarding the divorce, in Catholic Church, I think the divorce is not allowed.
Yeah.
In Orthodox Church, you can live for a second time, even for a third time. Yeah, no.
Well, see, this is why, I can understand the church maybe taking a higher position and not being involved just in the referendum. But I think, if I had something to say, I would say the church should take a position that's not lower, but higher. In other words, the church would be saying that this referendum is only the beginning. We should be involved in many other issues. This is just a token. This won't solve the problem if this becomes part of the Constitution. This isn't going to solve a lot. This is the first step. But there's so many of these other issues that are not being addressed. And that's what we need to start, is a larger dialogue and discussion about all of these issues. And then people will see that the church is showing leadership. And people will respect the church again, because that's what the church needs, is respect, and show some strength and some courage. And our churches in the West don't have that.
We have a different experience and different dynamics in the Philippines, because the church, when I say the church, the Catholic Church, is a very vocal church. And in the Philippines, the church, the Catholic Church, you can divide that into the lay clergy and then hierarchy. So even the lay, they speak out. And the clergy, of course, in the sermons, they speak out about all this. And the hierarchy is very vocal against certain policies of the state. Well, in the Constitution, we have, officially, we have a separation of church and the state. And then that's why it's been the source of conflict between the state and the Catholic Church, because sometimes the state or the government may interpret some actions of the church as, a violation of this separation of church-state. But the Catholic Church has been very vocal against divorce, against extrajudicial killing, against abortion, same-sex marriages. So it's a different dynamics in the Philippines. It's something that's why when you were presenting your paper, I thought that's not how we experience this, the church being quiet in terms of moral issues, because it's been really very vocal. And from time to time, the hierarchy, the bishops' conference, will issue pastoral letters regarding certain social or moral or even political issues. And these letters are read in all parishes all over the Philippines, stating very clearly what is the stance or the stand of the church on certain moral, social, or even political issue. Before the election, the Catholic Bishops' Conference in the Philippines issued a pastoral letter. It's not endorsing any political party, but it sets certain guidelines as to how they're going to elect or to choose during the election. So it's a different situation and different dynamics in the Philippines.
Can I ask you a question? Do they? Because the U.S. Bishops' Conference issues a letter before elections, but it's very general, and it has a lot of different issues in it. So it's not. I mean, it's a lot better than it used to be, in my opinion, but not as good as it should be. In the Philippines, do they kind of say, how do they address something like same-sex marriage or abortion or something? Do they say it would be wrong to support a candidate whose aim is to advance these things, or
some parishes do that. To the point of there was an election where several parishes issued a guideline that actually
then most of the population will accept. For instance, fornication was a reason for punishment and also divorce. Now they changed that law, and it could be only a reason for divorce, and it could not be like a matter of punishment. For instance, earlier, even that was also secular, but if you have a child out of wedlock, or suppose a married man had a child with another woman, married or not married, there was no way that his name will be written on his ID card, the father's name. Now it is possible. Even somebody is married with somebody else, and they had a common child. And I have a next door neighbor like that,
Yeah, no, actually that all devalues the value of marriage.
Yes.
And especially the solidity of the family, because traditionally fatherhood was defined not by biology, but by marriage.
Yes.
Okay, the father was the husband of the mother.
Yes.
Not the sperm donor, not the biological.
Yes.
That's very important in
Yes.
most societies. Yeah. John's point, though, is one thing that's very interesting you might find is this idea of Sharia law, especially in countries like Britain and elsewhere, where they're trying to bring Sharia law into into Western countries. Do you know what realm provides the wedge? The first area where they bring Sharia in Britain. This is in the case Norway. They did another study on this.
Yes.
Family law.
Right. Yes.
Family law is
The British did. The British had a hybrid basis.
But
Yeah.
they are still under the general British laws. But for instance, if somebody came from a Muslim country who who were like married with two women. And somehow they made their way into the Britain. And one of them wanted to get a divorce, okay? How you will do it? Because some people, it was regulated earlier that the cases where women might ask a divorce are different than the cases that men can ask a divorce. So in British application of this situation is you have to first go to council of Muslim, say elders or whatever, and if you make an agreement, if they cannot agree, then the British laws under the jurisdiction of, if they agreed on something, a court in Britain would just accept the decision. It's a compromise, kind of, rather than taking it, oh, this is against our law. And even if, for instance, you have all, say, couples without a marriage certificate. So, for instance, it is probably, if you go in the United States, you have two wives registered on the same man, no, it's not possible. But the British is making a kind of compromise. If both sides are agreeing, they are accepting it as a legal binding marriage. So Muslims will be fornicating if there are many complicated issues. For instance, the secular law of that country accepts only a single, couple marriage, and a Muslim. Do you want him to fornicate according to his own beliefs, or to have two wives?
So what I'd like to
Very
suggest
complicated, yeah.
is that since you're going to be talking later in the session
Yes.
on the demise of secular ethics, that we end this session now. And what I would like to do is just switch the order. Maybe you could go next, and then Sergey go third in this session. Is that okay with you, gentlemen? So that if there's any continuity, then you can just continue with your presentation now, Osman.
Yes,
And then Sergey goes third. Is that good for everyone? Okay, so thank you, Professor Baskerville.